All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today, and glad to hear everyone's able to view that. So we want to talk a little bit about Enterprise Mobility Suite, EMS, what all of that means, what it can do for you, what it is to think about how to approach managing devices and data and identity in your organizations, as well as not just manage it, but provide added level of a functionality for your end users, for people who are going to be consuming corporate resources, and to also do all of that while protecting and securing your data, your IPs, and also protecting your resources, right? Because that's a good part of this. And sometimes when we're saying protecting, we're talking about securing against things like data leakage, securing against people doing malicious attacks from outside, malicious attacks from within, but then also just cultivating a productive work environment by making sure that everything that people are using to do their job, they're able to use it effectively, they're able to use it securely, and it's pretty much easy and accessible to them from wherever it is that they might be trying to use those services. So from a very high level view, that's really what the Enterprise Mobility Suite is about, and we're kind of going to walk you through what are the different components today, how does it work, how does it fit into your overall corporate IT strategy, and basically how do you empower the mobile user. The reason that this is so important right now is, as I'm sure a lot of you are realizing in your organizations, is people are becoming more mobile, people are becoming more mobile with more devices, and people are working from more places in more locations from more of those devices, and it becomes almost a very addictive kind of and exponentially growing type of scenario, right? The more people are able to work from more locations easier, they want to do it more and more and more and more, and that pretty much builds this balloon effect of people trying to work from wherever they are, and them trying to be productive, because that's what people want. People want to be productive. They want to contribute. They want to be able to do it, right? But from an IT and IT management standpoint and a business standpoint, we want to encourage that type of productivity. But at the same time, we want to have control over the data, making sure that people are, yes, being productive, but they're doing so in a controlled and secure environment, right? So when people try to be productive and there's blockers or there's items that prevent them from actually being able to be as productive as they want to, that's when they try to circumvent systems and try to go around IT policies or restrictions and try to do things that are outside of the way that IT has deemed acceptable for an organization. And that's where you find obviously, like, the cases are people using some type of SaaS app or some type of other application that's not been approved, and whether it's installed or not, people are just trying to get their job done, trying to be productive, because let's face it, a lot of those other applications are in the consumer space. People are using Dropbox, for home file usage and being able to access files from their iOS device or their Android device wherever they go. And if they can have that experience, for their home files and their home usage, they would look to their IT organization and say, well, why can't I have that same experience at work? Why do I have to be tied to my work desktop or my work computer and not be able to have these files travel with me and not access them everywhere? And they might not think of all of the technology or the implications of doing that in a corporate sense, but they most certainly are there, and they most certainly are very real, and very real management problems for the individuals who are managing the IT infrastructure. So we already mentioned a little bit of what is driving these changes, right? Users are incredibly more mobile. There's billions of mobile devices now. Everyone has multiple devices. Everyone is using more and more applications, be it personal applications or corporate applications, and all of those things generate data and connect to data. So when we start to look at the mesh of users with devices, with apps, and with data, you have to kind of put silos and put management layers and constructive management layers around all of those, while actually securing who can connect to what, using what, when, and how. And that's really, again, what the EMS suite is here to alleviate for you, is kind of building out, one, the matrix of who's connecting where and when and how and why, and basically giving you the tools to facilitate those types of connections and secure it as you deem necessary. All right. So from here we have IT who has to manage those. We have the users who have to go through the experience. We have business partners who you maybe want to share data with, and as well as customers who want to consume items that you're putting out there. So all different scenarios and all different use cases, and basically all different layers that IT has to try to manage, right? So with that, we kind of break this down into 4 main areas, right? And those kind of build the 4 different product offerings within the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So the Enterprise Mobility Suite, EMS, it is a suite of Microsoft products, right? So you have 4 main components, and each one of these individual products, whether it's Azure AD Premium, Intune, or Azure Rights Management, or ATA, Advanced Analytics, and we'll dive into each one of them, they all fill a very specific gap. And each one of those in and of itself has a whole host of features that they provide. And when I say a whole host, each one of these is almost like a little suite in and of itself, which is then part of the larger EMS suite. So when we go back to the idea of protecting our corporate data and protecting all the different connections and providing IT management around that, we then break it down into these 4 buckets, right? And these 4 buckets are identity and access management, right? So validating that a person says who they are when they're connecting into corporate data, right? Or when they want to access some piece of data on your network, how do we validate that they are who they say they are? The next part is the actual device that they're connecting from. How do we ensure that that device is secure, that the device meets corporate standards, that it meets your level of security and scrutiny, and then and only then, if it does meet that criteria, will we allow the device to connect to corporate data. For information protection, right? So, if we secure the identity, the person is who they say they are, we make sure the device is secure, we're going to allow data to flow on that device. But what happens if the data leaves that device? How do we then protect the data itself so that the data is always protected, regardless of where it's traveling or who's accessing it from where, right? So it's obviously a multi-layered approach where people who are connecting to resources inside your environment, they're doing so in a secured manner. The data becomes protected if it should ever leave, and the data at rest becomes protected and encrypted. The last component here, advanced analytics, it's all good to protect that perimeter network. It's obviously something that's very important. We want to make sure that all of those other components are protected, that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that all of that multi-layered approach to security is happening. But what happens on the inside of your network? What happens if credentials are compromised? What happens if something is attacked from within, so to speak? These types of attacks are the most prevalent in the large-scale corporate identity theft world, right? So if we can all name a whole handful of ones, Home Depot, Sony, those are a lot of the big ones that happen. Almost every bank that's ever existed has become hacked. All of these hacks are typically very, very, very rarely done from the perimeter attacks, because we have all of these layers to protect the perimeter, right? And even the other three that we just mentioned. It's once someone's credentials become compromised, that compromised credential account, if it's an administrator, can sit inside of an organization for months undetected. In the case of the Sony attacks, when Sony was hacked, the person whose credentials were compromised, they were compromised months before the attack takes place, almost 9 months. The average time that this typically happens is over a 9-month period. Sony fell right into the exact average of how those attacks take place. An administrator's credentials were compromised with some type of phishing scheme. Someone got into their network. they put in some malicious software that laid low for a number of months and slowly leaked information out until it identified systems that it could take advantage of in a large chunk, and it got a large amount of data from them. So how do we prevent against that, right? So the credentials look real. The credentials themselves have been compromised, and someone's internally on the system. Obviously, then we need some type of behavioral-based system that can identify these types of malicious attacks from within your network. And that's the last component to this suite of products, right? So again, it's a whole suite of products. It's a multi-layered approach to security and access to all corporate information. And then for anything that's internal, it's behavioral-based analytics to see who's using what data, how they're using it, and basically, are they using the data that they should be using in the appropriate manner? So obviously, this is a whole lot of complexities because on top of the components we're talking about, because it's no longer just your data either, right? There's all these other services that people are using, that your organizations are using. You don't rely solely just on Microsoft technologies or Microsoft software. There's Box and Concur and Salesforce and other SAP applications, and you want to be able to secure all of those as well, and at the same time you want to give all of your users an easy way to consume or access those applications also. So if we start to converge identity a little bit more and bring those together, we can secure the identity aspect and allowing people to connect to these other applications to allow them to do that securely, and actually unify the identity for an end user who's going to be wanting to use those applications. And we'll also walk through what a lot of that looks like for some of the end users here. All right, so when we're talking, now we're going to break this down into talking a little bit more about each individual component, and we're going to start by focusing on identity. And it's important to focus on identity first because this is really the backbone of all this. Everything is going to move forward in the modern cloud-based world with the user as the focal point. The user has an identity, that identity is validated, that identity travels with them, licensing is tied to that identity is the single source of truth for everything that user is going to be doing inside of your environment. Now, we always had this, right? Identity was a resource with your traditional on-premise IT organization, right? You had your on-premise Active Directory, you had your user account, that's the user's identity. Well, now we need to extend that identity to the cloud. So yes, you can use your on-premise identities, you can have them synced with the cloud so that cloud becomes, that identity becomes a hybrid cloud identity, right? And then from there, once we have that, we can then tie it into all of these other services. We can validate that identity is who they say they are. We can do that through a number of different fashions. We can apply multiple controls over that. And then once we've built that backbone, made that identity a hybrid cloud identity, we can start to extend the things that identity can do, like using it for other types of cloud services, using it for other SaaS applications, using it for advanced reporting to identify who's connecting to what and when, and making sure it's done in the correct way. So when we're looking at building this connection, there is some connection services that can happen with on-prem to basically synchronize all of those identities with the cloud. If you're using anything like Office 365, you're familiar with this process. Now, some of the other added benefits that this then gives you is you just extended the capabilities of that identity into the cloud. So now we can provide things like, simple sign-on or single sign-on for other applications that are SaaS-based or web-based. So, for instance, Salesforce. If someone's using Salesforce and they want to use their same Microsoft ID to log into Salesforce, well, we can do that now. So it's really simplifying the process for the end user, because then they no longer have to have this, not another password, syndrome where, they have a Salesforce password and a password for the corporate Twitter account and a password for all these other services that you can now wrap into your Active Directory management. So it's the same management you've always been doing on-prem, but now you can extend the capabilities around that by enabling this hybrid cloud identity, right? So once we build that connection between your on-premise and the cloud, when Microsoft first started with this, it was a one-way connection, right? So whatever was on-prem was replicated in the cloud, and then you can then use that. But now we can actually have a bi-directional synchronization between the cloud and on-prem. So any changes that you should allow your users to make in the cloud, you can then have those changes replicated to your on-premise environment. That's a great feature, and it's a quick win for a lot of reasons. Typically, one of the first reasons that people look at something like that is like, wow, we really would like to offload some of these, tickets that are being generated for our help desk, specifically around password reset, right? So a lot of times the user locks themselves out because either they forgot their password or they punched it in wrong too many times, and they have to call help desk and generate a ticket. So all of those things can very quickly go away once we have bidirectional synchronization, because we can allow users to reset their password in the cloud. It will get reset. It'll synchronize back on-prem, and then it will enable them to log into their machines again, just as if IT was helping them. So this is a huge burden lift from your IT organization, but also it's a great feature for providing self-service in a whole host of other areas. You can do it self-service as password reset. You can do it with gaining access to applications. You can do it with gaining access to groups and other services inside of your organization. Basically empowering your users to use self-service so that their permissions and items can write back to on-prem to enable them to gain access to new and more expanded resources. Yeah, so it's a really great feature in that regard. So when we're talking also about identity-driven security, we also then have a whole host of other things that we get on top of that, because now if identity is the center of everything, we can identify who's connecting to what, from where, we can report against all of that, and we do get that behavioral-based analytics. Because also all of these items are cloud-based and cloud-focused, on the back end, Microsoft is then able to leverage, the full power of all of their data centers, millions upon millions of processors and cores and processing power, almost an infinite amount of compute to run, analytics against who's connecting from what, who's using what applications. You get a whole host of reports and analytics and alerts to say, people are logging in from these locations. And then it can surface up things that look potentially malicious, like, an individual is logging in New York, and then from a certain IP address, and then 20 minutes later from an IP address in Calcutta, which obviously looks a little bit suspicious when the user could not have obviously moved there that quickly. So it's things like that where we can leverage the infinite power of compute to at all times analyze every single thing that's happening in your environment. Now, with identity also, there's a whole and these security ports. All of these things are being constantly reviewed and analyzed. It also can look into your corporate identities to see if these identities are being utilized properly by ways of authentication, right? People logging into your services, but then also, are these identities being sold anywhere else on the web? I don't know if a lot of times you hear about things like the dark web or web auctions for people using compromised credentials. Obviously, the biggest case for that most recently was actually Ashley Medicine, where people, compromised all of their identities and then were selling their identities on the dark web, as it's called. So Microsoft actually, uses this machine learning process to scan the dark web and find out if corporate credentials are potentially compromised and being surfaced up on there. So really interesting stuff. Once identity is the core of all of that, we can identify where those identities are traveling and get reporting on all of it. All right. So so that's just the identity portion. One of the next portions then is that behavioral-based analytics. So this kind of piggybacks off of the identity conversation. So with ATA, Advanced Analytics, this is a behavioral-based monitoring system that does sit on-prem, and it basically does a lot of that same machine learning components, but for everything inside your network. As you mentioned before, typically when an organization that same legitimate would do something malicious inside of the environment. So Advanced Threat Analytics, ATA, this behavioral-based system, it will sit on your network and it monitors everything. It'll monitor everything. It actually does port mirroring level information analysis on everything that's happening in your environment, across your entire Active Directory system, across every Windows system. It can tie into a SIEM database as well, and it can run the behavioral analytics on that. Once this system gets up and running, it builds a baseline for every single resource in your organization. And then it takes 3 weeks or so. It takes a number of weeks to burn in. It's going to build a profile for every single individual, for every single resource in your environment. And then if an individual is, their typical procedure is a 9 to 5 working day. They log in from, this machine and this IP range, and they hit these servers. They typically, work in these particular applications, and then they log off and they're done for the day. Well, if something, if all of a sudden that same user logs in from 3 different IP addresses from different machines, and then all of a sudden are touching other components that they're not supposed to be touching, this machine then realizes that without advanced analytics, without behavioral-based analytics going on in the environment, no other system would realize that was a problem because the credentials look legitimate. But with behavioral-based analytics, it knows that, hey, this is outside of the baseline. This particular account doesn't typically do these things. This is a possible malicious threat. So that's just one example of one of the things that this system can do. It can also do some interesting things with honeypotting, with baiting, potential malicious attackers into using accounts that would only ever exist, basically to trap some type of malicious identity. So with another component in here is not just protecting these identities within your organization, but then how do we share across organizations? How do we link our identities that we've secured to other identities that have been secured in other areas? So there's actually some B2B, business-to-business collaboration between your Azure Active Directory that you can set up to configure so that you can deal with other organizations and their Active Directories as well. So if you have a partner organization that you want to secure their access to your applications in a very specific kind of way, you can do that. You want to share encrypted information with them, you can do that as well. You want that to be seamlessly integrated so that you're using your email addresses to share information and they're using theirs, and it's all authenticated. This way, if they try to share something outside of their organization, they can't. That's where all of these components come into play. So you can do that now by building that business-to-business link, and the two organizations can work together. Right? So not only does Microsoft's strategy obviously involve the identity and all these other components and the other SaaS applications for Salesforce and the other outside world and business to business, but a lot of this collaboration also extends further with further functionality in the Microsoft Office suite, right? So if we're looking at Microsoft Office and how does that take it a step further? Well, we can natively integrate things like two-factor authentication into Microsoft Office, right? So if we're talking about securing the identity, yes, it's great to validate people as who they say they are, but how do we do that? How do we validate identity even further? Even after we have all this analytics behind it, and we built baselines for people, but how do we make sure that they are who they say they are? Reporting and all that is great, but two-factor brings some teeth into that conversation. So now the user is then tied to something personal of theirs in order to authenticate themselves whenever they're accessing things in the environment, and you can have them have all of your users using their a personal phone, a personal email address. You can do a whole host of different alternate authentication mechanisms to make sure that they have some personal information tied to their account that they have to validate when they're going to be accessing corporate data. And all that ties directly into the Office products because it's fully integrated. So when we start to look at, okay, the identity, the identity across multiple layers, and then if we wanted to look at a specific application, something like email, right? So 9 times out of 10, when someone is starting with looking at the EMS suite and they want to protect something, right? It's always going to start with email, almost always, right? They want to make sure that people have access to their email everywhere. They want to make sure that the device is compliant, and then they want to make sure that they're able to control the application and control the data on that application. So when we're looking, the EMS suite covers every single layer of that, because what we can do is, regardless of the device, whether it's an iOS device or an Android device, OS X, Windows desktop, right? We can make sure that the device is secured, that the device is compliant, and compliant can mean a lot of different things to different people. Compliancy could mean that the device must be encrypted, that the device must be a domain joined machine, that the device must have a certificate on it. All of these things could be a definition of compliance for you, right? So we want to make sure that the device meets that standard. We want to make sure that the application is what we want them to use it on, right? There's times when you say we only want people to access their email if they're using an approved application. We only want them to access email if they're using a native application to an operating system. So you can control those items as well. To basically say, if this individual wants to access email on their personal device, they can do it. If the device is compliant, meeting our set of criteria, and they're accessing it from this application. All of that is controllable through the EMS suite with a combination of Intune and Azure Active Directory. And then also we can containerize that data. We can say that the data inside of that application is segregated from the personal space. And if for some reason the device becomes compromised, gets lost, we can remove that data entirely. If the individual was to leave the organization and it was their personal device and you want to remove just the sensitive corporate data, you can remove just that corporate data. You don't have to reset the entire device in that case. Okay, so one of the ways in which we can start to think about email and how we can not just control it, but then also control what it means for a user to actually be able to use corporate data on certain devices, we come to this idea of conditional access. And the idea of conditional access is just that. It's conditional-based access to corporate resources based upon your set of criteria. And the way that works is, let's say, for instance, I have an iOS device, and I want to put my email onto that iOS device. Let's say it's an iPad. So I have my personal iPad. I want to put my email on my iPad. So I go to the iPad. I go to add a profile. I put in Office 365, and I type in my username and password. Now, what's going to happen on the back end there is it's going to verify, is the users who they say they are. Maybe then it's going to prompt me for multi-factor authentication, and I'm going to go through the multi-factor authentication process. Okay, now after that I've identified myself. Now it's going to check with that device. It's going to say, is this device secured? If the device is secured, and basically it can mean the device has to be enrolled in the MDM solution. It's going to give me instructions to then enroll in the MDM solution. If it's saying, okay, the device has to meet a certain set of criteria, must have a password on the device, it's going to see if I have a password. If it doesn't, it's going to prompt me to put a password on it. After that, I'll put the password on the device. It's going to walk me through all of those steps to secure the device, and then it's going to say, okay, am I trying to access email from the appropriate application? If I am, it'll then actually start the email flow into that application, right? So all of this is conditional access. It's an intuitive process for the end user to go through to basically ensure that they're connecting to those corporate assets the way that you want them to. Now, it's going to go through all those checks. Now, let's say, for instance, something was to happen and the user decides, all right, well, I now am compliant. I got email on my device. This is wonderful. And then they decide to jailbreak their phone. So they jailbreak their phone. At that point, right, because this is conditional access, their access is conditional based upon meeting all of the criteria. They would then lose, if you deemed it so, they would lose access to email on that phone, and the email that was there would get selectively wiped, right? So it's a dynamic process. It's not a one-time process. It's not just they enroll and they gain access to corporate resources. It's they're enrolled and they're constantly challenged. They're constantly challenged to make sure that they're meeting all levels of compliancy that you deem what means compliant. And as long as they keep meeting it, they keep getting access. If they don't meet it, the access is restricted. All right. So once we start to look a little bit further ahead with not just iOS and all the mobile spaces, obviously there's a lot more that we can do with Windows 10 devices as well. There's additional controls that you can get with antivirus and actually joining a Windows 10 machine to an Active Directory domain, and then also making sure that the device is what it says it is. And there's a whole added host of features and functionalities once we start to bring Windows 10 into the conversation. Windows 10 can also, whether it's on a laptop or a tablet or in a micro sense, it can be extremely versatile in the way that it can be managed remotely with all of these things. Windows 10 is a cloud-first, mobile-first type of operating system, and all of the controls to manage it as such are usable through the entire EMS suite. All right, so now let's also say we have the scenario where a user has personal information as well as corporate data. So this is the real BYOD sense, where a user, they have a good mixture of information, right? The managed applications that IT manage, can be completely segregated from the applications that a user has on their personal device, right? So they can have Netflix and they can have OneDrive, and those can reside right alongside the OneDrive for Business. So you can have a true commingled experience for your end users. Basically, at the time when someone goes to access corporate resources like email, like OneDrive, or one of the other Microsoft applications, and they enroll into your services in order to become compliant, to meet those conditional access policies, at that point the managed applications are going to containerize and take ownership of the individual managed apps. Then the user can use those right alongside each other. And if you want to build up the walls to basically segregate out your managed apps away from the personal apps, you can do that. You can block copy or transfer of information across the corporate container space and then the personal container space. Right? The twain never have to meet in that regard. Right? So they most certainly can commingle in that area. Right. Now, anytime someone goes to launch one of the corporate apps, the corporate data is containerized, and even inside the individual app, the personal data is also segregated as well. If we start to think of the case where you might have an email application that has the corporate email profile and then the personal email profile. In that case, those two can both reside in that application, and the data does not have to cross between the lines within there. So if we're taking also the idea of an email attachment or an email or OneDrive with actual data, if you open up that email attachment and you're inside the corporate space, right? So it's in the corporate email profile. If they open up that Excel document, as long as they stay within the corporate space, they can cut, copy, paste, do whatever they want with that data. But if they try to copy it out into their personal OneDrive storage, back it up to the iCloud, paste it into any other personal app, it can block all of that functionality, right? So within the individual app, you have containerization. You have containerization at the app layer, and again, all of this is verified that the identity of the user is who they say they are, and that the device is compliant as well, right? So that's a little bit on the actual personal devices, a little bit on the identity. We spoke a little bit about advanced threat analytics and behavioral-based analytics across all of those things. So one of the other areas is the protecting the data itself. So it's great to build that containerization and make sure that the files are moving or only doing what or only being accessed where you want them to be accessed from. But how do we also share content to other people, or make sure we're sharing it in a secured fashion so that if I share a file with one of my coworkers, I maybe want them to have access to it, but only for a certain amount of time, or only in a certain way. So one of the other components of this EMS suite gives you the ability to do all of that. You can protect files with encryption. That encryption can move and stay with the individual files themselves, and regardless of where that file travels, whether it's inside your network, outside your network, on a protected device or on a non-protected device, it doesn't make a difference. The file will always be protected, and it will always be protected with the permissions that you set on that file. So I can take a Microsoft Word document and I could send it to my coworker Victoria, and if I send it to her, I can give her permissions to view that. I can take away her permissions to screen capture. I can take away her permissions to do a save as. I can take away her permissions to cut and copy and paste on that individual Word document. If I send it to her, when she opens up that Word document, it's going to tell her what permissions she has to do with that document and what she does not. It's also going to only allow her to interact with it in the way that I set forth, right? So if I say you can't save this file, the save button is going to be grayed out in Microsoft Word, and that gets back to how it's better integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So Microsoft Word, the Microsoft Word application is aware of these types of encryptions, and it will just entirely gray out those options in the application itself. Also, all of this encryption gives me the ability to track those files. So I can track to see, oh, Victoria got the file on the 3rd, she opened it on the 2nd, she waited 3 days, and she opened it again. So I know what she's doing with that file and when. If she sends that file to anyone else, I can track that information and get notifications on her or anyone else opening it. If I wanted to make sure that she didn't send it to anybody else, and I see other people trying to access that file, which I can get notifications on, I can revoke that file's access across the internet and basically shut it down for everyone. So it gives you very, very granular control over individual files, making sure that only the intended people are consuming those files and only doing it in the manner in which you set forth. So all of these items, they do work cross-platform. All of the RMS components, all of that file level encryption, the MDM management, managing the devices, managing the identity. It all works across the many platforms and flavors of devices and of the many SaaS applications that are out there. Another thing, because these are cloud services, they are maintained and managed, and they are a service that is updated over the cloud, right? So Intune is on the mobile device management component is on a very aggressive schedule with updating itself every month. Every month there are new updates to Intune. Every month there are new updates to Azure AD Premium, which is the identity management solution within here. These updates happen on the back end on the cloud, and they're constantly rolling out new features. So if this is February 23rd for this webinar, by next month, March 23rd, there'll be even more features that this suite of product is doing. Also, all the time there's added components that are being added to the EMS suite as well. Right. So now, if we're looking at not just using this just within the EMS space, attaching this to things like Office 365 is a true win, right? Because if a lot of times we get the scenario of, okay, we've either are going to move to Office 365 and put our mail in the cloud, but then if we do that, how do we protect the mail? How do we go through all of these other things that we spoke about in the EMS suite with our mail in the cloud? Or maybe we want to move, but we're hesitant because we don't know how to protect it, or we've already moved, and now after we moved, we're like, oh man, we forgot. Now we have to really think about who's connecting to our mail and when and how. And That's a very common scenario. Another one is, okay, we started to use Exchange Online, but now we're really interested in using OneDrive for Business because now people really want to use their files anywhere, but at the same time we want to control how people are using Exchange Online resources, or how they're using control people, or how they're using OneDrive for Business online resources. So when we start to look at basically the life cycle of projects in the Microsoft ecosystem, people are either looking at or move forward with Office 365, and then they're okay. Well, now how do we give this some teeth to IT in order to manage and secure it? And that's where the EMS suite really comes into play. Now, what most people don't know is if you're already using Office 365, you already get basic versions of all of these components, right? There's a basic identity management component, which gives you some single sign-on, which gives you some basic multi-factor or two-factor authentication. There's basic MDM. There's even selective wipe for certain applications in there. And even the content level encryption, there are some components in there in Office 365 also. So a lot of people don't even know that, but they are there. If you start to go through your Office 365 suite, you can see those things. But with EMS, it's obviously a lot more feature set, a lot more richer feature set, a lot more, as it implies, enterprise level feature set with regards to Office 365, Office 365 management, and then the individual components of each one of the products in that suite. So, I mean, there's some examples, but the high level ones are with identity. In order to do any advanced MFA features, you're going to need the EMS suite. To do any of the write back to on-prem, so if you want to do the password reset, that's a self-service functionality, you need to have the premium features for that. Intune in and of itself is one of the premium features, but there are some basic MDM components that you can do some selective wipe with, like just a few applications in the Office 365 basic offering. For the RMS, which is the content level encryption solution, again, you can do some of that on with Office 365 as stands, but with EMS, you can extend that to on-premise and build a hybrid scenario where you have file servers where you can protect the individual files on your file servers, or you can integrate it into Exchange Online and build these automated rules for encrypting content. Some of the really cool scenarios for that is, let's say, for instance, a user is going to email something with the word confidential in the subject line. You can have Exchange Online identify that the word confidential exists in the subject line and automatically make that an encrypted, protected email. And then that email then it falls under the permissions that you set forth by a template, and it's protected and encrypted. Or the other big ones is, let's say someone's trying to send someone an email that has something that looks like a credit card number or a social security number or anything else that might fall under HIPAA or FICA compliance or any of those other agency type restrictions. And you can identify all of those things and have it automatically encrypt that communication. So it's really interesting stuff that you can do with that in the RMS world. So when we mentioned briefly, when we start to bring Windows 10 into this conversation, how do we then take this a little bit further? What are some of the added benefits and the added features with Windows 10? So you can basically extend all of these components that would seem pretty much like impossible to do in a full Windows experience, but actually bring it down all the way down to the desktop level with Windows 10. So you can do SSO for Windows 10 apps. There you can have mobile device management for Windows 10 devices and have them connecting in from all over the world. You can have Windows 10 devices that are attaching to a cloud-based Active Directory structure as opposed to your on-premise one, and you can manage them that way and enroll them into Intune automatically. So there's a whole host of Windows 10 features that are extremely makes it extremely easier to manage an enterprise as it becomes more dispersed or spread out or starts to move away from just being within your four walls. Right. Now, I know we've talked a little about suites, a little bit about products, and a lot about, what the value for a lot of these things are. But there's also another suite of that's even higher than the EMS suite, and that's this cloud suite. So basically, if you're already looking at, Windows Software Assurance, and these are a lot of examples of just Microsoft suites and different ways that they do licensing and things of that nature. But with Office 365, if you're already using that and the EMS suite sounds like something that you need in your organization, you can also bundle that together with your Windows licensing and get even more functionality out of it. So there's just a number of different ways that Microsoft has tried to make it easier for you to be able to bundle these different licensing suites together. Where this also becomes extremely advantageous is really like greenfield scenarios, or if you wanted to adopt a model to simplify your overall Microsoft licensing, and you really wanted to center everything around individual users and license the user for every single thing that they would need for Microsoft. This is how you do it. So if I was to give one user this type of licensing, they get all of Office 365, which is their Microsoft Office applications. It's Microsoft Exchange Online, so it's email. They could have Skype for Business for communications and calling and things of that nature. They get Yammer, Enterprise Social. They get everything that's in Office 365. They get everything under the EMS suite, which we've been talking about here today, and they get their actual Windows licensing as well. So if I wanted to license an organization in this day and age, this is how you can do it across the board to really simplify your licensing. Right? So that's a whole host of information there. When we start to then, I have these are some additional supplemental slides where they're just going through different ways that users are connecting. It's different examples of other ways that the EMS suite can kind of translate your existing type of connecting scenarios to the way that EMS suite can do things now, right? So if you want to again show, this is just some examples of how when people are connecting, where they're connecting to, how they're connecting to it, and what the things you want to block. EMS Suite gives you control over these types of scenarios. Whether people are connecting from a web browser, a PC or mobile device, they want to be able to connect to on-premise but not be able to connect to cloud, or vice versa, secure those connections. Obviously, we have the ability to do all of those things. So again, it's just building up that cloud mobile-first approach, giving you the ability to manage cloud, on-premise, and be able to facilitate the management of all of those things. All right? So when we're also talking about data protection, the data protection doesn't have to necessarily reside in just Office 365 or OneDrive or on-prem. If we want to secure a device, we can have that device enroll. Again, once it enrolls, it's going to gain access to all of those things. I know we're talking a lot about cloud too, and the reason that we wanted to keep this slide here too is to remind you that these components can all be built in hybrid scenarios as well, to extend the functionality of all of these systems into on-premise locations as well. On-premise Exchange, on-premise SharePoint, on-premise file servers, on-premise SCCM integrations, on-premise web applications. If you want to present an on-premise web application and utilize it the same way and manage it the same way as this cloud-first mobile-first scenario, you can do that. There are added considerations to take in place, and you have to build those connections between your on-premise environment and the cloud environment, but you can do that. There's no one size fits all for anyone here. So any one of these scenarios can be built to incorporate into on-prem. So we went over again the conditional access component, but some of the other things that we have to realize is the conditional access can be extended even further. We can get very, very granular with it. We can say what the device state is, whether it's a Windows 10 device, whether it's connecting from a certain IP range. We can get very, very complicated with it. We can layer in ADFS on top of there if you're familiar with that. And ADFS can act as an authentication filter to basically say, well, we also want to make sure that the user is part of this group when connecting on the second Tuesday of the third month of the year. You can get very, very complex for what that authentication process looks like. You can do that. Most certainly it gives you the ability to. If you want to, it is there for you. So we have just about 5 minutes left. So we can take a few minutes to answer some questions. I know we went through a whole host of information. I'll just open up the chat thing here and we'll take a look here. So we have just a few. Can you get copies of the slides? I suppose you can. I don't see why not. Referring to E3 licenses. So I assume that's for the Office 365 ECS suite. So yes, that is actually Office 365 E3 licensing. Yes, Victoria will be sending out a recording. The slides, yes, as far as I know, there is no confidential information or anything in there so that you can get the slides for that. Is there a matrix of what is available with Windows 10 controls versus Windows 8.1? Microsoft does have a bunch of information of that, and as well as New Signature, we have a bunch of information for that as well. If you're looking for a matrix, it's really broken down then by the individual product, right? So if you want to know with the identity management, what's possible with 8 versus 10, that's one matrix, so to speak, right? And then with Intune, what's available, or the mobile device management component, what's available between those two as a matrix? Yes, we can break it down like that too. Even Windows 7, actually. So a lot of the things that we were talking about here are also applicable for Windows 7. Granted, not all of them, because it is an older operating system, but there are a number of components that are possible with Windows 7, like even conditional access. Windows 7 does support conditional access. All right. So we have a few minutes left. I don't know if there's any other questions. If there are, I don't see any other them coming through. But if not, well, I'd like to just thank you for taking the time today to go over this with me. I hope if answered some of your questions and gave you a pretty good overview and a look into EMS and why people are using it, what it can do for your organization, and if you want any more information on it, well, we'd be happy to talk to you about it. If you want a specific demo of how these things work, or how what is the end user experience like, or what is the IT administration experience like, I'm happy to dive deeper on any of those types of topics or conversations. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Mike. That will conclude today's webinar. An archived recording will be sent out in 1 to 2 business days. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.